welcome to the FT headquarters for the latest in our series of interviews on economic and market outlook for 2017. Today we'll examine the new economic and political order which is likely to emerge from Trump's election win and the Brexit referendum last year, their impact on economy and market performance and risks. To discuss these topics, I have with me Carl Tannenbaum, Global Chief Economist at Northern Trust. Hello, Carl, and welcome.
Good to be with you.
Carl, the US market has been rising almost uninterruptedly for 8 years, mainly driven by unconventional monetary policy. And over the past few months, it has been driven mainly by Trump's promises to put America first. So what do you think is the actual role of economic fundamentals in determining asset prices?
Economic fundamentals are terribly important in underlying market performance. I've certainly been a bit surprised at how well the markets have done since the election, given the uncertainty that it created and some predictions that the economy would not fare very well under a Trump presidency. But as you separate the signal from the noise in considering Mr. Trump's policies, and that is a full-time exercise, I'll assure you, the conclusion is that many of the things that he's attempting to do will be positive for American economic growth and also for corporate profitability to the degree that he's able to deliver reductions in American corporate taxes. And in that light, the asset price performance hasn't been that unexpected, and some of the things that may unfold for the American economy will be positive.
But do you think that perhaps markets are priced rationally today, or perhaps have borrowed some of the 2017 return by rallying so quickly after the election?
Embedded in today's U.S. market prices are certain expectations about new policies that will be stimulative to economic activity and profitability. The risk is that delivering on those promises may be much more complicated than many people thought. Our legislative process is not an easy one to get through, and even though both the presidency and our Congress are controlled by the same party, there are factions within the parties that don't agree with one another about the proper way to go about managing the nation's finances. Our view is that it may take longer to implement those policies if they are implemented at all, and they could be smaller than originally thought, which would put market performance at some risk.
PWM recently published its second annual Global Asset Tracker survey, which tracks the investment and asset allocation intentions for 2017 of around 40 regional and global private banks, which together manage more than $7.8 trillion in client assets globally. And almost half of the respondents believe that Trump's presidency is the single most important market risk for 2017. So how much can Trump's presidency disrupt established economic trends?
His style is certainly very new. His policies are not yet clear. He promised many things on his campaign, but the Republicans in the legislature have different ideas. How those two reconcile with one another is really going to be very key to the direction of policy and therefore the American economy. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be interesting to watch how that evolves.
Mm-hmm. 80% of CIOs in our survey believe that Trump will contribute to grow the U.S. economy, and 3/4 of respondents believe he will contribute to increase global protectionism. So do you think some of his measures, like banning immigration or protectionism or the risk of a trade war, may actually backfire on the U.S. economy and have serious consequences on inflation and negatively impact the U.S. dollar?
There are some things Mr. Trump has proposed that should be very supportive of business. The United States has a very disadvantageous corporate tax code which he would like to bring level with the rest of the world. However, some of the other things that he has proposed, including restrictions on trade, among them our border tax, would actually be quite inflationary and damaging to some American businesses. And the limitations on immigration would really be very damaging to the United States demographics. We're, like other countries, getting a little older, and so the inflow of immigration is critical to staying collectively young, vibrant, and avoiding some of the problems with an aging population. Mr. Trump has said that the strong dollar is, quote, killing the United States of America by disadvantaging us in the trade arena. But I think the United States, perhaps uniquely among countries, finds its currency driven less by the flow of goods and more by the flow of capital. There's a great deal of money coming into American markets, some for the good returns on our assets, but others that are seeking safety. Many of the money's coming from places like China. And when you have those sorts of inflows, the demand for the American currency to buy those assets is going to remain strong. So in spite of some policies to the contrary, it's quite likely that the American dollar is going to remain quite strong against world currencies.
A rising dollar, the threat of protectionism and expectation of interest rate rises are not a great mix for emerging markets. How has your view changed since the election?
It's always important to sort emerging markets into different categories. There are some who have diversified economies, who have saved up reserves for a rainy day, who have not borrowed in currencies other than their own, and who do not have problems with corruption. But there are others who would be very vulnerable to restrictions on trade, and if the dollar and U.S. interest rates both get stronger, it would put them in a very difficult position in trying to pay back their debt. On the low side, unfortunately, are places like Brazil and Malaysia, which have bad mixes of economics and corruption. In the middle are places in the Far East, which are very dependent on trade with the United States, and any change in their status would be very harmful to them. And then in my own hemisphere, everybody is watching Mexico, which has come a long way since their challenges of the early 1990s, thanks to NAFTA. But if NAFTA is restricted or turned around, it would be very damaging to Mexico.
Brexit and Trump's win are clear signs of growing populism and protectionism in the world, as we discussed, and could play a key role in the upcoming political elections in Europe. Do you expect the next few years might mark the end of globalization and the start of a multipolar world? And what impact could it have on the economic growth?
I certainly hope that the recent election results do not represent the beginning of the end to globalization, which I think in the core has been very beneficial to societies at all levels. Unfortunately, though, there have been classes of people in each individual country who haven't felt the benefits of trade, and perhaps governments have not reached back to them with sufficient strength to pull them up and give them new opportunities. It is those voters that feel disadvantaged, those voters that are embracing things like Brexit, Donald Trump, and prospectively in France, Marine Le Pen. At some point, though, we have to demonstrate that we're sensitive to their needs and begin to turn the tide away from what seems to be a growing nationalism.
Thank you very much, Carl, for joining me.
It's my pleasure.